sunny day. This is our fourth time, I believe, at the Pacific City Birding and Blues Festival, and I can always predict the weather by the number of people in the auditorium. It's unusually beautiful, so I'm not going to keep you here a long time, but this is a subject that's kind of important to us at Badger Run. Bev and Joanne have been volunteering with Badger Run for quite a while. I started the organization about 14 years ago with the intent of doing about half a dozen rehab birds a year. Most of the rehabbers in our area have either died, retired, or been shut down, so we now do about 300 a year. Kind of grown a little bit bigger than we intended. But one of the things that has come up in the news a lot lately is the status of many bird species, conservation, decline. It's a subject that I could stand here and talk on. I could do an entire semester-long level 200 biology course. So we're barely going to dip our toe in the water today. So if you say, well, why didn't Liz talk about, 30 hours of research, and I had to narrow it down to a 1-hour presentation. So, couple of quick basic facts. There's a group out there called the North American Bird Conservation Institute. They do a study every few years, and their last report in 2016 indicated that about 1/3 of the birds in North America need urgent help. Now we've got a little over 900 species in North America, depending on who you listen to. So that's about 300 species of birds right here in North America that are in severe trouble if we don't step in and do something pretty soon. So, of those species that are in trouble, what we've discovered is that it's the neotropical birds that are probably at the highest risk. Those are the birds that come up here to North America to breed, and then they head down to South America, Mexico, the Caribbean, and spend a lot of time down there for the rest of the year. Well, obviously, with all that traveling and all these different locations that are important to them, there's more chances for things to go wrong in any of those places. So the neotropical species make up about half of all the birds in North America. I took the liberty of taking the birding checklist for right here in Nestucca Bay, and I highlighted a few birds. You'll see I highlighted 18 birds on there out of the 207 species on your checklist here. Those are the birds in the bay that are not neotropical. These are the neotropical birds here in Nestucca Bay. 189 of your 207 birds on this checklist are in the group of birds that are at highest risk for going extinct in the near future. Kind of important we do something about it, huh? 91%. So, next time you drive out there and you're looking at the estuary and you see 10 birds out there, different species, know that 9 of those are likely to be in danger. Of the list that the National Bird Conservation Institute came out with, they came up with 432 species that were probably of most concern. What they do is they grade each species. The highest score that a species can get is a 20. If it's a 20, it's pretty much virtually extinct. The Carolina parakeet is a 20. They don't think there's any left in North America. Thick-billed parrots, they don't think there's any left. So we start going down the hill, spotted owls right up there. So here, we took a look at which ones again are found right here in your area that are scored at a 14 or higher, or at least a 13 with a nasty looking trend. And what we found is about 15 of them that are on your checklist that have these high scores. Evening grosbeaks is that beautiful little guy up there at the top. He got a 13. Their species numbers are severely declining. Same with the olive-sided flycatcher. Red tips, white-winged scoters, horned grebes is this little guy right here in the corner. Breeding plumage, it's probably one of the prettiest birds I think I've ever seen. Just beautiful golden tufts on the side of its head. You'll see them out here probably right about this time of year. Your Brandt's cormorant, yellowlegs, marbled godwits, all these little guys are all right here. And they may not be in a couple of years if we don't hit off our chairs and go do something pretty soon here. The two highest ones on the list for right here in the Big is the Heerman's Gull and the Elegant Tern. The reason for that is, and I'll talk a little more about it later, is where they go to when they leave here. Now, obviously, again, I can't concentrate on going into great detail on everybody, but I did want to talk about evening grosbeaks a little bit more because that is a bird that is near and dear to my heart. We are from the Klamath Falls area, so down in the southern corner of Oregon. And that should be playing, or is that not playing? Play? Okay. Well,
yesterday we found that music or the sounds are actually playing on the computer itself, not the bigger system. Does that help? Okay.
no. And unfortunately, this is a disc. Well, I'll play it afterwards on my laptop. Actually, do that. And I'll just, we have a small enough group, we'll just look at it on the small screen, right? So, what you're supposed to be seeing here is a video that I took in my backyard. We'll see if it'll play on here. Of evening grosbeaks. Evening grosbeaks back in 2012. And we're going to have equipment problems. As I said, I live out in Keynote, down near Klamath Falls. I've got about 3 acres. And when I bought the property, it had been vacant for about 8 years. So the brush was extremely dense and thick. There was a lot of ladder fuel, a lot of skunks, a lot of scorpions, and a whole lot of birds. And so we needed to clean it up a little bit for fire safety, but we very carefully waited till after breeding season, made sure all the nests were gone. Then we went ahead and started doing some selective cleanup. And what we found was we ended up with even more grosbeaks once we kind of trimmed up the property for them a little bit. And so I started putting out food. And I put out a variety of different things. I discovered that the grosbeaks were really quite fond of black oil sunflower seed. That was pretty much their favorite. And so I started putting out black oil sunflower seed for them. Well, they ate, and they ate, and they ate, and pretty much kept eating, and I discovered I was going through roughly a 50-pound bag a week in black oil sunflower seeds. Okay. So this is about a 54-second video, so I think I can walk around that fast. This is what my property looked like back in 2012. I counted over 200 grosbeaks at my feedings. They were thick. They couldn't get to the feeders fast enough. And like I said, there were about 200 of them swarming around 3 different sunflower feeders. And I thought, that is the coolest thing in the world. I love this. And every year they'd go away, and every year they'd come back with a little while, and there'd be all my grosbeaks again. A couple of years ago, there were a few less, and then a few less. The last, I'll say 2 years, 3 years, I had none. Not a single grosbeak. This year, I have about 6. I've had a couple come back, but nowhere near the numbers. And they were so much fun to watch there, and just so beautiful, and their song is so pretty. And I thought, where'd all my grosbeaks go? Which is one of, I'm a little possessive, my grosbeaks, right? But that's one of the reasons that I chose this as a topic, because I really wanted to know where my grosbeaks went. And it turns out that according to the NABCI list, yes, they're one of the ones that is seriously declining. And we'll talk about why in a minute here. That is a Heerman's Gull. Have any of you been lucky enough to see one out here? They're here right now. Yeah. They do. There's a population down there in California too, yep. According to your checklist, they are here right now. They are rare, but they are seen here. The problem with the Heermann's gull and the elegant tern, which is another one on the list, is both those birds nest on a little tiny island down in the Gulf of California called Isla Raza. Isla Raza is about 50 acres, and it is one of the breeding destinations for a huge number of gulls, terns, and various different birds. Well, it's a 50-acre island, right? It doesn't take much to trash a 50-acre island. So all these birds are breeding there. All these people were saying, wow, look, let's go to the island and see how cool this is. So they finally declared the island a wildlife sanctuary in 1964. Great, right? That means the birds are left alone. Anybody heard of ecotourism? They lead a ton of tours to the island. You can step out of the Zodiac boat, get on the island, and go see all the breeding Heermann's gulls and elegant terns and all the other birds. And they say, no, they're fine. It doesn't really have any impact on them. Okay, we said that about Hawaii too, until somebody brought in snakes and various different issues there. All it's going to take is somebody accidentally bringing in a pathogen, a virus, a predator, something that's going to start wiping these guys out. So their numbers are pretty sketchy. 350,000 sounds like a lot, but if that's all you have in the world in breeding birds, that's not a big population when they're making that big a journey and ending up on one island to breed. A couple others that are not on your list, but I happen to know they're in the vicinity here. Snowy plovers are rated a 15 out of 20. The short-tailed albatross, which is a beautiful pelagic bird. You'll see them if you go out in a boat out here a couple of miles. You should be able to see them if they're still around. They're rated at a 15. The spotted owl, obviously, and then the marbled murrelet. These two are mostly victims of old-growth forest depredation, because the marbled murrelet, even though it's an ocean bird, they nest up high in old-growth forests. So losing old-growth forest means they lose their breeding ground. Habitat loss is the #1 reason for species decline in the United States. What are we doing? Habitat loss, right? Well, there's the obvious stuff. Let's go build a football stadium. Let's go pave this whole place as a parking lot or a park and ride. Let's build this new community housing development. Those are the obvious ones. The ones that are not so obvious are things like you'll see sustainable, sensible logging in areas. You'll still see clear cutting. Private landowners can say, go clear cut my property, I want that money. Perfectly legal for them to do that in most cases, and yet it severely alters the breeding habitat and the ability of these birds to survive in those areas. Harvesting during breeding, that sounds stupid, right? Who would ever do that? And we're not talking so much about like farmers and hay harvest and that kind of thing, because that happens after the breeding season typically. But there are a lot of crops that are being harvested during breeding, fruit crops, tree crops, things like that, nuts, that can affect the breeding cycles of these birds. Fragmentation is one that I studied a lot in college, and I found it amazing that so many people didn't really get it. I was down in Southern California at the time, and of course the economic boom and growth in Southern California is insane. I used to live in San Diego. Now there really is no break between San Diego and Los Angeles, it seems. It's just one giant city that takes up the whole space. So I was actually in real estate for a while, and these developers would come along and say, well, we just bought this 100,000 acres over here, and we're going to build 200,000 condos on it. And the government would come along and say, well, you have to give us back some land to mitigate what you're going to do. So you have to preserve some green space as mitigation for this development. And they'd say, okay, how many acres do you want? And the government would say, well, if you're going to develop, and I'm making up numbers, don't quote me, but if you're going to develop 100,000 acres, we want you to give us back 50 acres. All right. 50 acres is a decent-sized piece of land for birds to breed in, right? But the developers didn't give you a 50-acre piece. They put 3 acres over here on unusable swampland and 2 acres over here because it was too close to the freeway. Nobody'd want to buy the condo right there under the overpass. A couple of acres over here. Well, how desirable is that land for birds or any kind of wildlife? It's not. And then you figured, okay, well, here's this piece that's 10 acres, right? That was nice of them. there's something called edge effect, which means you may have a 10-acre parcel, but that outer, depending on the species, 10 feet, 20 feet, half a mile, 2 miles, is too disturbed because of what's on the other edge, is too disturbed to be suitable property for this wildlife. So you may have a 10-acre parcel, but you really have this little 1-acre island in the middle of it that the bird says, oh, hey, that's a cool tree, I like that one. Then you have something called source sink populations. And what that is, hi, Ewok, yes, my boyfriend the owl. You have source sink populations, which is, let's say you've got a fairly decent area for birds to breed in, and pick species, spotted owls. You've got a fairly decent area for them, but they're breeding, and it's starting to get a tad bit crowded. And they see this space over here, and think, wow, that's a nice tree over there. So they move to the new destination, which is a small bit of mitigated land, and it really doesn't support them very well. Now they've kind of lost their ties to the old community. They're trying to breed and survive here. There's really not enough food. The habitat's not great, and that population actually starts declining. So they left a good place to go to a not so good place, and now they're not doing so well. So source sink is a nasty effect of this as well. Non-native and invasive species. Well, of course, we had to bring Squirt, our little starling, with us, and you can come up and meet Squirt up close and personal after the presentation. Personally, I love the little guy. He is the sweetest, cutest. He talks up a storm. We were playing dominoes, and he kept trying to move the dominoes around and play with us, you know. He's just a kit to have around as a captive bird. In the wild, these guys are deadly to bluebirds and a number of other species. They'll go into their nests and they'll kick out the bluebird's eggs and lay their own. Or they'll go eat the baby bluebirds. Or they'll go in and lay one of their eggs and then go away, and mama bluebird raises it thinking it's one of her own. Now, if in order to raise children, because remember, the goal in nature is to get your genetics out there ahead of somebody else's, right? If you have more genes out there in the population, chances are your lineage is going to survive better than anybody else's. So if all you had to do to raise offspring was give birth to them, think how many you could have. You don't have to feed them, clothe them, put them through college, teach them life skills. No, all you got to do is give birth. Hot math. So if a starling can lay its eggs in these other nests and just hatch out, leave these babies in there to hatch out, they multiply at an incredible rate. Again, where I live, I used to be able to drive down the road on a Saturday afternoon and in a couple hours count 20 to 40 bluebirds out there. I went out this last spring, a year ago. It took me all day to find about 6. And I'm not even sure if I saw the same one twice, a couple of times. So are they damaging these populations? Absolutely. They're having a huge impact. House and Eurasian tree sparrows. Has anybody not seen them? You're in a city and they're thick, all over. And pigeons, obviously, the rock doves, rock pigeons, all over the place. People call us all the time. I found this baby bird. It fell out of a tree. Where? On Main Street. It's probably not a painted bunting if it's sitting on Main Street, right? It's likely going to be one of these species. We do not rehab and release invasive species at Badger Run. We do euthanize them upon possession, other than the occasional starling, which we have a permit for. Now, obviously, as a wildlife rehab, we have permits for everything we have. We have rehabilitation permits for all birds other than raptors. We have rehabilitation permits for all raptors other than eagles. We have rehab permits for eagles. Then we have special possession for education permits for all birds other than raptors other than eagles, special possession with salvage, which means if I have one that dies, I can take its feet or its wings and use them for education, right? Then we have Squirt. And I apologize if you were here yesterday, you heard this, but Squirt here, we used to have another starling named Kip before Squirt, and we'd had Kip for many years. And Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife changed their rules, and they said all non-native invasive species must be euthanized the minute you obtain possession. I said, okay, that's fine. We don't release them anyway. We usually euthanize them, and we use them for food, for the vulture and the hawks and different critters. And they said, okay, well, euthanize Kip as well. No, He's our baby. We've had him for years. He's a wonderful little education ambassador. And they said, but you can't have starling, euthanize him. I said, no, I don't want to do that. Can't I get a special permit for him? They said, well, you can try. So they gave me the name of the guy I talked to at ODFW, and I had to apply for a non-native species permit. Well, these permits are designed for zoos that are housing bears and wolves and coyotes and mountain lions and things like that. So the very first question on the permit was, describe your perimeter fencing and how many volts is it? It's a starling, it'll fly right over the fence. What are they talking about? We don't have any high voltage fencing. They said, so send us the blueprints of your fencing. What is your backup generator? How many volts is it? Can it handle keeping the fence charged? If the animal is to get out, what is your recapture plan? How many tranquilizer guns do you own and what style? And I'm reading this thinking, this is the dumbest thing ever. It doesn't apply to starling. So I had a few glasses of wine and I filled it out. So we have no perimeter fencing. It doesn't matter. It's a starling. It'll fly right over the top. My plan, if it gets out, I will set out my starling trap and I will kill 10 more to mitigate the fact that I let one loose. So I filled it out, sent it in. The next morning I thought, that wasn't very smart. And I opened my email and there's an email from this Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife guy and he said, here's your permit. That was the best application I have ever read. I absolutely loved it. So we are now permitted, but this little guy was harder to get permission to keep than the turkey vulture or the hawk up here. Some other problems, hybridization, mallard ducks, right? Mallard ducks are everywhere. Have you ever seen those ducks that you look at and you think, oh, it's a, yeah, it kind of looks like a teal. No, it's a mallard. No, they're hybridizing. So we're starting to lose species integrity in a lot of ducks because mallards are crossbreeding with them. This is happening with some other species. Lack of habitat we already talked about. And then there's plain old outright killing. Okay? Now here's the funny thing. Funny, haha. When we talk about things like wind generation machines, which are in the birding world, conservation world, called bird blending machines, because they slice them in half. They're horrible on bird populations. When we talk about that sort of thing, we tend to get a whole lot of people that say, well, yeah, but that's just an accidental strike now and then. We don't need to worry about it. But when we talk about how we're going to go out and try and eradicate 2 billion starlings this year, you can't kill starlings. Don't go killing starlings. That's not their fault. So you get a lot of mixed political stuff, and it's not so easy necessarily to go after what you need to go after. Pesticide use is obviously a controversial issue. Organophosphates is what we used to use. We all know DDT, monocrotophos, things like that are horrible pesticides. They cause a lot of problem in the environment. So a lot of farmers and various growers have switched to using neonicotinoids. They are better, as the name implies. They're related to the nicotine you get in cigarettes and that sort of thing. They are much safer overall than what we were using. But there was a group of researchers that studied white-crowned sparrows, like this little one, and they found that if that white-crowned sparrow eats the equivalent of 4 coated seeds, they lose 17% of their body weight on average and get confused and disoriented and lose the ability to migrate. Oops, 4 seeds. And these farmers are planting millions of acres. Well, the seeds, the coating protects the seeds so they grow so we have food. What's the alternative? I don't know. We haven't found a good one yet. Contamination of our oceans. Right here, living in one of the most beautiful spots on the coast. This is my favorite town on the coast, by the way. And I'm not saying that because you invite me. I just love it here. You know, we're right on the beach. We're looking out at this gorgeous ocean, and I can't help but see what's right beyond what I'm looking at. There are garbage dumps out there in the ocean, places where plastics aggregate because of the currents. And according to the Oceanic Society, we are dumping between 4 and 12 metric tons of plastic into the ocean every year, which would cover every foot of coastline on the planet. Now imagine how much plastic it would take just to cover the coastline here at 3 Capes. And multiply that around the world. How much plastic is that? Half of what they expected to be in 10 years. And most of it is in the form of microbeads. So anybody know what microbeads come in? Toothpaste, facial scrubs, harmless, innocuous things that you wouldn't think about have these little microbeads of plastic ranging from literally microscopic up to the size of like little BBs and things. But all that stuff gets washed into the wastewater system and eventually finds its way out into the ocean. This is a remote beach in, I think, South Africa, and it's covered in plastic. This is a bird on Midway Island, a young albatross, that when the parents are getting food for the babies, they skim the water for little fish, little brightly colored fish, and they find things like big lighters, shotgun shells, erasers, bits of different little pieces of colored plastic. They scoop it all up, then they go back and they regurgitate what they think is food to the chicks. And the chick's crock gets so filled up with all this plastic it has no room for real food and it starves and dies. This is one of the garbage dumps out there. This one is in the Caribbean. That's all plastic and brown algae floating on top of the surface. That's a close-up of it. What's most of it in this particular dump? Spoons, plastic utensils, picnicware. There's one called the Great Pacific Garbage Dump that's about partway between here and Hawaii. In fact, if you stand here and look west, it's right out there. They're not sure how big it is because a lot of the plastic in it is microbeads and microparticles. And if you go over it in a boat, it doesn't look like this. You can't necessarily see anything. If you look at it from satellite, you can't necessarily see it. But what they do is they take water samples and they condense it down and measure it out and extrapolate the data from there. Depending on whose estimate you read, that one dump out there in the Pacific Ocean, right out there, is either the size of Texas or the size of Russia. They're not sure. Petroleum products, right? Crude oil, bad. Everybody lighten your carbon footprint. Stop using crude oil, right? Buy hybrids, drive less, right? Well, we all know what an oil spill does to birds, right? It's horrible. It coats them to the point that they either lose their water repellency and drown, or they lose their insulating properties and they freeze to death, or in trying to preen it off of themselves, they ingest enough of it that it's toxic and they die. That's the common one that we see. The one that we don't see, and this was in the New York Times recently, if anybody wants to read more about it, there was a spill off the coast of China of over 100,000 metric tons of something called condensate, which is a byproduct of producing natural gas, right? Let's all use natural gas. It's clean, it's wonderful. It is. It's a lot better than fossil fuels. But one of the byproducts of producing natural gas is this condensate, which is extremely toxic. It doesn't clump like oil, so they have no idea how to clean it up. It's just out there, and it's spreading on the currents, and they think it's going to have a major impact on one of the largest fishery areas off Japan, one of the largest areas in the world. And they don't know what to do about it. They have no idea. Climate change, I am not going to stand here and debate with people. I personally believe it's happening. I believe the glaciers are melting. I think sea level is rising. I think overall we're seeing some weird weather patterns that are very strange. Down in the Klamath Basin, our weather this year has been just totally unpredictable and odd. El Nino, La Nina currents are changing. You guys are probably seeing some effects of that up here. But what's happening is as the oceans are warming, pelagic birds and penguins, birds that depend on fish for their food, are having to travel farther and farther to find enough food. I believe it's king penguins. They leave their babies in a big clutch, right? And the adults all go, not all of them, but a lot of the adults go out to the ocean, which is a huge trek, and they swim and swim and swim and catch enough fish and food to come back and regurgitate and feed the babies. Because of the warming of the oceans, they don't find these concentrations of fish and plankton that they used to. They're having to travel farther and farther, taking longer and longer, and they're coming back, and their babies have been picked off by skuas, they've been frozen to death, they've starved to death, and they're really dropping like flies because the parents can't get enough food to bring back to the babies. Hurricanes, severe weather changes. We've had a lot of hurricanes. There was one recently that devastated half of a huge forest down in Puerto Rico. It doesn't appear, from what I researched, that forest is particularly heavily used by neotropical birds coming from the States, but you can bet it put a hard hit on the birds that live in the forest down there. One of the other ones that I thought was sort of interesting was here in the United States. They did some studies, mostly back east, but spring plant growth is changing. It doesn't occur at the same time that it used to. It's coming earlier in the east and later in the west. So the plants come out, the insects haven't bred yet, the caterpillars come out, the plants are almost done, the caterpillars have nothing to eat, the birds are arriving, the seeds are not there yet, or the seeds are gone, the bugs are gone, or they're not there yet. They studied several different birds. They found 9 fairly common songbirds that were unable to keep up with the change in the seasons. They were coming back to breed and finding no food. Well, you can't raise your nest of offspring without enough or proper food. Most of these are eastern birds, but these two are right here, Kansas warblers and yellow-billed cuckoos. Serious declines in those populations. So if this trend continues and they're unable to change their migration schedule and cope, they're not going to get back here in time to breed and raise offspring. So what are we doing about it? Well, a lot of things. One of the Bibles, if you're interested in this, is this book right here, which is the American Bird Conservancy's Guide to Bird Conservation. And in here you will find this lovely little pyramid. It's a great plan. Are we going to be able to implement it? I don't know. That's a tough one. Obviously, for the most endangered species, we need to get them listed on the proper list so that there is zero hunting, zero tolerance for anything that endangers their habitat. For the next group of species, the watch list ones, management practices, what are we going to do to keep them from escalating into that red area? And for all the species, what are we going to do? You know, what kind of energy source is going to be safe? What are we going to do to get this plastic out of our oceans? There's a group in Norway that has some fantastic ideas of how to clean up the ocean. These engineers have come up with some amazing ideas, but it's expensive. Who's going to pay for it? There are many, many governmental programs out there that obviously the U.S. Migratory Species Act everybody's familiar with. There's another one called the Neotropical Migratory Bird Conservative Act, or Conservation Act. They are doing amazing things, donating a lot of money, getting a lot of matching funds, and working on some of these locations that are of really high risk for neotropical bird populations. Trying to get the locals involved, trying to get entire cultures to come together and take responsibility for protecting these habitats and areas. What can you do, right? Take your pick. I've said, well, join a cleanup event. I have people say, oh, I can't walk on the beach. I have arthritis. I can't do it. Okay. Can you contribute? No, I'm living on a fixed income. I don't have any money. Can you do grant writing? Well, yeah, I was an English teacher. Okay. I'll bet you can write a grant. I'll bet you can help out an organization with that. At Badger Run, not that we're necessarily working in conservation so much, but we try and do a fundraiser a month. Can you wrap a gift? We do a gift wrapping fundraiser in December. Come wrap presents for us. Suggest that to one of these organizations. Habitat creation, wildlife gardening, something you guys can do. You have a wonderful climate here for that. And it seems like every presentation I do at Pacific City, I come back to reduce, reuse, recycle every single time. Cleanup events. I see everybody in this room pretty much could do it. How many of you know that there is one next weekend right here at Bob Strauch State Park? Did you guys know that? Okay, here's something you can do if you can't get on the beach and help clean up. How about helping these guys with their advertising and PR a little bit? How sad is it that every person attending this festival does not know about these two events that are, what? I mean, Bob Strauch Park is a half a mile away, quarter mile. Neskowin State Park is a mile, right? 2 miles, something like that. You know, and the others are a few more miles away, but they're all right up and down the Oregon coastline here. Until I started researching for this presentation, had never heard of this organization and knew nothing about any of these cleanup dates. And I consider myself pretty aware of what's going on in this world. So, yeah, help these folks out with their PR. You know, how come nobody knows about it? I just found this Googling things on a web, just Googling. If you are able to give some money, who do you give it to? How do you decide? Do you give it to the Cousteau Society? Do you give it to Ocean Conservation? Who do you give it to? There are many websites out there that analyze all these charities, whether it's water conservation, ocean cleanup, pets, whatever it is, Badger Run. All these charities have to be 100% transparent, right? If you say, I want to see Badger Run's tax records, I am required to show them to you. I didn't bring them with me, don't ask me today. But, in general, a not-for-profit organization must be 100% transparent. So you can go to these different web pages that analyze these charities and find out which one. You may decide that this one spends more money on the Pacific Ocean than the Atlantic Ocean, and because you live on the Pacific, that's near and dear to your heart, that's the one you want to contribute to. Backyard Wildlife Habitats. The National Wildlife Federation actually has a program that they will help you, guide you with species selection of different plants and things in your yard. And then they will actually dedicate your yard for you as a backyard habitat. Certified backyard habitat. It doesn't have to be fancy. This, granted, is a pretty gorgeous but fancy garden with lawns to mow and all that stuff. It can be pretty wild. It depends on what wildlife is in your area and what kind of a layout you want to set up for it. Reduce, reuse, recycle. I know, I sound like a broken record, but it's true. Be honest. How many of you have had something to drink out of a plastic water bottle today? Thank you. Thank you. I admit, the water in these cabins is horrible. Sorry, I can't drink it. But 99% of the time, do I buy water in a plastic bottle? Absolutely not. I have a couple of metal bottles that I reuse. I try and reduce my plastic usage as much as possible. So everybody uses cloth shopping bags now, right? You don't go up to the market and get plastic bags, I hope. Purchase local.
You can't have plastic bags in Portland, it's against the law.
Right. And California's going that way too, I hear, which I think is...
They charge 10 cents a bag.
Okay, yeah. So, what an easy thing to do. Here at the festival, you're giving away totes, right? With registration package. Take that tote to the grocery store. Go get some groceries, right? Purchase local. Who shops on Amazon? I admit, I do. It's convenient. It's easy. 11 o'clock at night and I think, oh darn, I'm almost out of cat food. Cat food, right? Think about all the packaging material that's wasted. Now granted, I recycle my packaging material, but even still, if I'd gone to the grocery store while I was on a trip to town, so I didn't make a special trip using gas, and picked up my cat food, that would have saved on a lot of packaging. Bringing utensils from home to work. I'm weird about this. I don't like I know it's weird. I will use utensils in a restaurant. I don't like reusing office utensils because I don't trust my office mates to wash them the way I would wash them. Okay? I'm just weird that way.
No, you're not.
Okay.
I don't either.
Okay. Yeah, but we're both in the insurance business, so maybe that's part of it too. I don't know. But, so I bring my utensils from home, right? I bring my little cooler with my lunch in it anyway. I throw a fork, a spork, a knife, whatever I need in there. Bring it home and wash it at home. How many of you grab fast food every once in a while, right? Yeah, we all do. Tell them, no straw, please. I don't need any napkins. I have a rag in the car. Take a couple of rags with you. Save on paper towels, napkins, all that stuff. And obviously walk, bike, ride, share, all those good things. I'm not a Pinterest person because I'm not a very creative person or artsy or anything like that. You could show me something and say, what would you use this for? And I'd say, birdseed scoop? I don't know. But I did find a couple of cute ideas. Those are the lids from laundry detergent containers. So instead of buying the plastic insert for your desk drawer, which means somebody made plastic, right? Take something that's already been made, if you're going to use a plastic thing, and repurpose it as an office supply holder. These are 2-liter soda bottles that they've cut down and painted and made adorable little baskets for Easter baskets. Rather than go buy a plastic Easter basket, fill it with plastic grass. something like this. Coffee containers, right? A little paint, little stenciling, and you've got containers for all of your lovely ingredients. And there's the people that go really hardcore. If anybody wants to build one of those, I would love to try it. I just think that's the
I'm
coolest.
pretty sure it would float.
It should float, yes, it would work, yes. I don't ever want to drink that much soda or water in my life, though, so, but, you know, in general, there are so many things that we can do on a small basis, day by day by day, that will have a global impact. And when you walk out of this room, there's, what, 5, 10, 25, 30 of you in here. Go tell a couple of people. Tell them to tell a couple of people. Say, hey, you know what? I have an idea. Let's start a fundraiser for metal bottles, right? We have a gal in our town down in Klamath Falls that you can send her, email her a picture, and she'll put it on one of those metal bottles. I meant to bring mine today and I forgot it, but she'll put that picture on a metal water bottle for you. So what a great gift for somebody. You know, if you know somebody that likes the old plastic bottles, right? Gift it to them next Christmas or their birthday and say, hey, I really want you to use this for your health and for the environment. And I'm not even going to get into that. People that take their plastic water bottles and freeze them. Does anybody know what that does?
No, but we do it.
Do you? The plastic crummy bottles these days?
No, not those.
Not those,
Okay.
a little harder ones like the ones that you get the.
The reusable metal or like the Yeti cups, those
They're
kind
the
of things.
plastic
Juice,
ones
that
for
juice
juices.
No, use car cooler.
Chlorofluorocarbons are in this plastic. This is how long I've been doing this. I did my 6th grade science report on chlorofluorocarbons. That was a lot of years ago. Don't ask how many. But if you take this bottle and you leave it in your car in the sun, the chlorofluorocarbons, I can't talk today, start leaching out of the plastic into your liquid. So you're actually consuming them now. One of the most highly cancerous substances on the planet. If you put it in the freezer, when it warms up, it leaches them out as well. So you're leaches them into the liquid. No, leaches them into your liquid.
We just use it for the
Ice.
ice for the cooler, and keep it in the container.
That's all we.
That's fine, but do not drink out of the container. Yeah. No. No. But there's so many things we can all do that help, and I really encourage everybody to step in, get involved, Google a couple of things, check it out. It's just amazing how many little things, little ways you can save. I did a ton of research on this. These are a number of organizations and different places you can go to find some different things out about this. As I said, this book is absolutely fantastic. Here was one I was going to touch on. I grabbed a copy of your Civic City Sun, right? Love it. Open it up to the events page. Here's all these wonderful events going on. None of those beach cleanups are listed. Anybody know the people at the Sun?
Yes, he's been here during the weekend. I'm surprised they usually do look at it. It might have been in a previous one about a month or something.
Could be,
That's good.
but I would love to see these people talking to those people and getting their schedules together. One of the other things that I really encourage people to do is be your own beach cleanups, right? Doesn't have to be an organized one. Every little bit helps. They actually have a name for it now, and I can't remember what it is. What is it, jog cycling or something, and walking? Whenever you go out for a jog or a walk, bring a bag with you, a cloth sack with you, and pick up trash as you go. There's a name for it
She
now.
does it every time we go.
I do too.
You get the man.
No, I
Walks
do.
his dog.
It seems like we're cleaning up people's yards and you know, the next day they're gonna throw their crap right out.
I know,
Yeah,
I
that's
know,
what
I
this is
know.
about.
Anyway, we do have the birds up here. The reason I've got these guys out, obviously the non-native invasive, birds that are in decline. Turkey vultures are not in decline here in North America. On the scale of 20, I believe there are 6. So they're in pretty good shape here. But if you guys heard us speak 3 years ago, I did a talk on vultures. 95% of the vultures in India are gone. Something like 50% in Africa are gone. Our numbers in the east are tanking. The black vultures are really tanking. And most of that reason here in the United States is lead consumption in vultures. Lack of education's a biggie. And then Maya, the Swainson's hawk there, Swainson's hawks are ones that score not high enough to be on the list. She's about, oh, thank you, she's about a 13, 12 or 13, I believe. But almost twice in my lifetime, Swainson's hawks have been at risk of extinction twice because they are so specific in where they go in the summer and where they go in the winter. And there have been a couple of catastrophic events down in Mexico and Argentina that tanked their numbers to the point that they weren't sure if they were going to come back or not. So we do have the other birds with us. If you guys want to see the red-tailed hawk, the great-horned owl, and the rough-legged hawk, we did bring them. If you didn't get a chance to meet them yesterday, you can come on up and ask questions and get to know everybody personally.
How is it that you came to have the vulture?
The turkey vulture was hit by car, which is the #1 reason we get raptors in. Because not just vultures, almost any raptor will be down on the side of the road eating roadkill, and they hear the car coming, and the brain says, uh-oh, fly, and the body says, we've been at the free all-you-can-eat buffet, we're a little full. We call it Thanksgiving Day syndrome. They actually cannot take off with that much food. They have to actually digest and cast. So another little tidbit for you, nothing to do with this in particular, but